A Fox News alert, the mayor of Charlotte, North Carolina, now saying the video of the fatal police shooting of Keith Scott will be released. It will be released. It's just a matter of when. Hello, everyone. I'm Melissa Francis. The announcement comes after a fairly peaceful night of protests over Scott's death. Demonstrators marched through the streets while National Guard troops watched. Overall, police made 3 arrests, one of them a suspect in the murder of a protester on Wednesday night. Last night, the crowds demanded to see the body cam footage of the shooting, but police have resisted, saying it could inflame the situation. Rick Leventhal joins us live from Charlotte with the latest. Wow, this is a story that just keeps changing, Rick.
Yeah, and Melissa, the police also say that that video is part of an ongoing investigation, which is another reason they don't want to see it released just yet. As you mentioned, it was a very busy but much calmer night last night, thanks in part to the hundreds of National Guard troops and police officers from the state police who helped local police in keeping the streets safe. The midnight curfew that was in effect last night will be in effect again tonight and possibly through the weekend as a tool for law enforcement if needed to clear the streets. And we also learned that there was an arrest this morning of the suspect in the murder of Justin Carr. He was shot and killed during the violent protests in the streets on Wednesday night. The chief says surveillance video helped identify the suspect and helped identify others who had been arrested for smashing doors and windows and other crimes against property during the looting and rioting on Tuesday and Wednesday. And again, late yesterday, the family of Keith Scott was allowed to view the police body cam and dash cam footage of his death when he was shot by a Charlotte police officer Tuesday afternoon, which sparked the violent protest. But despite calls from the family and from demonstrators, that footage, as we discussed, not being released to the public anytime soon.
One piece of evidence will never, ever make a good case. I know the expectation that video footage can be the panacea, and I can tell you that is not quite the case. There are a lot of other factors that have to support and corroborate even what you might visually see. But the process is painstakingly slow sometimes.
The family says Scott was not armed. The chief says he was, and the video backs up the officer's account. Melissa, we should tell you that there was another video, a cell phone video, that was apparently shot by Scott's wife. Fox News has now obtained a copy of that video, and we are going to turn it around and show it to our viewers. It has graphic language, and in that video, you also cannot tell if Scott is holding a weapon, but you hear police repeatedly tell him to drop the gun.
Yeah, his wife Rakia shot that video from her own cell phone camera, and it is graphic. We're working on it right now, and as you said, we're going to bring it to our audience just as soon as we can. Rick Leventhal, thank you so much for that report. Another Fox News alert for you now. Donald Trump adding 10 more names to his list of potential Supreme Court picks after dropping 11 other names back in May. The addition to Trump's list includes state Supreme Court justices, Court of Appeals judges, and Republican Senator Mike Lee of Utah, who's actually refused to endorse Trump for president so far. This is in addition to 11 picks that Trump already forwarded to replace the late Supreme Court Justice Antonin Scalia. They have similar legal backgrounds as those on his latest list. And the brand new bombshell in the Hillary Clinton email investigation sparking a major uproar on Capitol Hill. It turns out the Justice Department gave an immunity deal to Clinton's former chief of staff, that's Cheryl Mills, and 2 other staffers as part of the now closed FBI investigation. Chief Intelligence Correspondent Catherine Herridge is live in Washington with more on this. Catherine, what do you make of this development?
Well, Melissa, based on new documents provided by the FBI to Congress, the Republican chairman of the House Government Oversight Committee told Fox by phone now 5 people were given limited immunity agreements by the Justice Department. And as you mentioned, they do include Clinton's lawyer, Cheryl Mills, who got her deal in exchange for FBI access to her computer.
My understanding, Director, is that you offered him immunity. Why did you offer him immunity, and what did you get for it?
Yeah, that I'm not sure what I can talk about in an open setting about that.
Well, he's not going to be prosecuted, so.
Right, but I want to be careful. I'm doing this 24 hours after the investigation closed. I want to be thoughtful because we're, as you know, big about the law, that I'm following the law about what I disclose about that. So I'll have to get back to you on that one.
That's one of those TV situations where you got something you were not expecting. That was clearly not the phoner with the congressman from this morning. Though he did tell us in that phone call that the 4 other deals went to Clinton IT specialist Brian Pagliano, who set up the server that showed classified information outside secure government channels. Heather Samuelson, the Clinton aide, who decided which emails were government business and which should be destroyed. Paul Combetta of Colorado-based Platte River Networks, who used a technology called BleachBit to destroy the Clinton email archive, even though he knew there was a congressional order to preserve the records. And State Department employee John Bentel, who ordered those who voiced concern about Clinton's private email use never to discuss it again. The congressman said that they pressed the FBI to see these deals, and they just arrived this morning, Melissa. So it was not timed, the release of this information, to coincide with the upcoming debate Monday.
Interesting. What does the Clinton campaign have to say about this information coming out now?
Well, we just heard from the White House a short time ago.
The White House thinks that it was appropriate for the FBI to offer the immunity to those 3 individuals.
Josh, off the top of my head, I can't recall an instance in which I second-guessed the decision made by the FBI director or an independent investigator at the FBI, and I'm not going to start today.
The Clinton campaign also released a lengthy statement after this reporting became public, accusing congressional Republicans of overblowing, the agreements. It reads in part, this kind of agreement is not as unusual in such an inquiry as this, and it came after these aides had already given full interviews to the investigators, and the House Government Committee senior Democrat Elijah Cummings said Republicans will stop at nothing to tear apart the FBI's independent investigation to try to damage Secretary Clinton's presidential campaign. The bottom line is that next week is going to be a very big week for the FBI director. He is back on the Hill, and he will be testifying before the House Judiciary Committee. Boy, I'm having a hard time speaking today. Sorry about that.
Friday. It's
happens
Friday.
every once
You're
in a while.
done.
Okay. But anyway, he's going to be up on the Hill next Wednesday. That's really a hearing to watch. Many of the people on that hearing are also on the Oversight Committee, and they were really taken aback by the number of deals, and clearly they had to press the FBI to get them.
Amazing. Catherine Herridge, fantastic reporting as always. Thank you.
Okay.
Thank you. We love having you on. Turning to politics now, in the much anticipated debate matchup between Donald Trump and Hillary Clinton. It's just 3 days away. It'll be one of 3 times they will meet on the debate stage in the 46 days before the election, and both sides say they are not sure how this one could play out.
If she's nice and respectful, you know, he can be incredibly charming as well. You really have to gauge the moment. He's spending a lot of time studying, and he's taking it incredibly seriously. But at the same time, you have to be yourself, and you need to be true to yourself, and you need to be true to your message.
I worry about it. I think maybe we're coming into a place where both candidates ought to be really challenged and challenged the same way. But Donald's been able to get away with some things that Hillary couldn't, and frankly, nobody could.
Our panel is here. Charles Payne is the host of Making Money on the Fox Business Network. Alan Combs is the host of The Alan Combs Show and a Fox News contributor. And Catherine Timp is also a Fox News contributor and a columnist for the National Review. Charles, I got to start with you. So I almost drove off the side of the road this morning on the way here when I heard them mention that they were putting Mark Cuban in the front row to troll Trump. Are you kidding me?
Yeah, he's going to be making faces at him the whole time. Yeah.
What is that about? I mean, does that strike you as ridiculous?
It does strike me as ridiculous, but you know what? This thing is just the most 100 million people are estimated to watch. It is the world's ultimate circus. We've never, ever seen anything like it, so that's just the cherry on top of it all. and again, no one knows how it's going to play out. Everyone's being given different types of advice. This is like Ali Frazier or the Thriller in Manila, but we're going to see it here just on Monday.
Do we have that tweet from Mark Cuban? He was saying that let's see, we just got a front row seat to watch, go ahead and scroll up, watch Hillary Clinton overwhelm real Donald Trump at the, go ahead, keep scrolling, I can't see the little monitor there, at the humbling at Hofstra on Monday. It is on.
Yeah, you know what, though? Better be careful with over-promising. Yeah, I would be under-promising right now if I'm in Hillary's camp, or even Donald's camp.
The thing is, okay, first of all, if Donald Trump can go to Mexico where he's getting death threats to go there and he can be calm, I think he'll handle a troll that owns a basketball team just fine. Also, but the Clinton campaign, they put him there. And she's supposed to be the adult in the room. That's her main selling point. She's the adult in the room. That's more of a student council election move than an adult move.
Yeah, I don't know if I would have picked Mark Cuban to throw in there to kind of intimidate him. Alan, I also think it's interesting. I mean, you heard Tim Kaine. We heard that soundbite at the beginning where he's saying, look, you know, he's gotten away with all this. And now this is sort of the mantra that you're hearing from the Clinton camp is, wow, nobody challenges Donald Trump. No one gives him a hard time. He gets away with a free ride.
And he gets away with stuff that Hillary Clinton could never get away with.
No,
it's really not. We've hardly looked at the Clinton, at the Trump Foundation, the play for pay that he's guilty of, the possible breaking of the law at Trump University. You know, this has hardly been dealt with by them. He's had a pretty much of it. And he only goes on at this point. And at this point, he won't go on. He'll go on mostly friendly media outlets at this point. He is very careful about who he talks to and what he says. He holds these rallies and he lies.
Trump is careful about what he says. Are we watching the same
He's careful about who he. Now you can realize he's not that careful sometimes.
No, he's not careful.
Careful about who he talks to, I should say. Okay. But look, you know, he will lie with impunity because it doesn't matter. Facts don't matter to him, and facts don't seem to matter to a lot of his supporters. He'll get away with whatever, and that's the problem.
Do facts matter to Hillary Clinton, Charles Payne?
Listen, of course not. I mean, no, listen, I mean, come on. Hillary's got so much baggage in this thing, and you can almost start calling her Teflon. I'm telling you right now, that even the idea that in the last couple of days she's rebounding in some polls really blow me away, from the Clinton Foundation to the email scandal to the way she even handled, she couldn't even tell the American public, I have pneumonia.
Yeah. I don't know if she's really rebounding in polls. Let's take a look at, we have the Electoral College map, and it looks like a lot of the states are leaning, ones that had been a toss-up, kind of leaning in his direction. If you look at, for example, Iowa went from a toss-up to lean right. Colorado from likely Dem to lean Dem. Minnesota, solid D to lean D. Kat, I don't know, things are kind of moving in his direction still.
Absolutely. Plus, if you talk about winning a debate, I think he's going to be great at the debates, because the things that people remember about the debates are the zingers and the interesting sound bites. Okay. That's what most people, I mean, I can't wait to watch the whole thing, but most people don't watch the whole thing, and he's like Captain Zinger, so I'm pretty sure that he's going to have the most interesting parts that people listen to. Plus, we've never seen him in a one-on-one debate before. Seen her do it a lot of times, so it'll be easier for him to prepare than
We're going to have a special debate team coming up later in the show to tell our viewers what to watch for and give them some tips. It should be interesting. We got to go. All right, breaking news on the shooting of Keith Scott in Charlotte. Keep going. After this family releases cell phone video of the incident, what it shows and doesn't. Fox News alert, the wife of Keith Scott today releasing cell phone video of the shooting as protesters call on police to release body cam footage of the day Scott was shot. Scott's family has seen the video, but they say it left them with even more questions. An attorney for the family saying, quote, while police did give him several commands, he did not aggressively approach them or raise his hands at members of law enforcement at any time. Ted Williams is a criminal defense attorney and former homicide detective. Thanks so much for joining us. You know, we are efforting this video that his wife shot from her cell phone camera so that we can show our audience. I have seen it. She says over and over again in the video, don't shoot him, don't shoot him. She says he doesn't have a gun. He doesn't have a gun. He has TBI, traumatic brain injury. I'll assume that's what that means. He just took medicine. What do you make of all this?
Well, that's one portion of the video, but this video, I think, provides a lot of context to, and it seems to me to support law enforcement more than it supports the fact that this gentleman had a book in his hand. You hear law enforcement, you hear her first, and I think it would be the wife saying, Keith, don't do it. Keith, don't do it. Keith, don't do it. And the next thing you hear after a pause there, and when law enforcement is on the scene, you hear, drop the gun, drop the gun. Not drop the book, but drop the gun. And so that gives some context to the fact that this gentleman may very well have been armed at the time. I don't know if he was pointing the gun at the police officers, but police officers have to make split-second decisions. They cannot wait until a person who someone is saying, Keith, don't do it, points a gun at them before they take some action.
But she does also say, I mean, if I have to argue the other side here, she does also say over and over again, he doesn't have a gun, he doesn't have a gun. I mean, would she say that if they were staring at a gun in his hand?
She may be saying that and more. But when a cop comes on the scene and says, drop the gun, that leads me to believe, irrespective of what the wife has said, that individual had a gun. It would be stupid or stuck on stupid for a cop to come on the scene and say, drop a gun, if someone doesn't have a gun.
Yeah. What do all of these different videos do to the temperature in this city now? Because you look at this video, I mean, I watched it a number of times. It's very hard to tell what's going on. She's yelling. She doesn't have a clear view. And the same with the video that the family has seen, that the police chief has said after watching it, I had a lot of questions. I mean, most people who have seen it say you kind of have more questions than answers once you see the video. None of it is clear, is my point.
It's hard, even with a video, Melissa, to get the whole and complete story. But when you look at the fact that there is a gun on the scene, that law enforcement officers were legally and lawfully there, and you hear, Keith, don't do it, and you hear, drop the gun, to me, I'm befuddled as to why law enforcement didn't want to release this video to the public.
Well, I mean, they say that they're bound by the law and the way that the case proceeds, and they have to also show it to the family first, and it's not up to them. But we'll see going forward what happens here, because now we've gotten to the point where it seems like the public needs to see it. Sir, thank you for coming on the show. Absolutely. Ted Williams, we appreciate it. Two senators looking for answers from the U.S. immigration officials. The new emails at the center of a growing controversy. Two senators calling for answers from the Department of Homeland Security after they say some officials are trying to speed up the immigration process as the election gets closer. Senator Ron Johnson saying one email in particular encourages employees to work overtime to process cases. Adam Housley is live in Los Angeles with the latest. Adam, this has clearly caused a lot of concern for some about influencing this upcoming election.
Absolutely, especially when we saw back in 1996 a congressional investigation back then talked about some of this and some of the problems they had when this was tried back then. In this case, a specific office within the Department of Homeland Security is being accused of an election year immigration push to try to register as many people as possible, possibly affecting the November election. Fox News has obtained a letter addressed to Department of Homeland Security Secretary Jay Johnson from Senators Ron Johnson of Wisconsin and Chuck Grassley of Iowa, which questions the U.S. Citizenship and Immigration Services Office for attempting to swear in as many new voters as possible before November 8th. According to the email sent within that office, the USCIS, back on July 21st, quote, in part it says, the field office, due to the election year, needs to process as many of their N-400 cases as possible between now and fiscal year 2016. This all comes just days after the revelation that poor management of fingerprint records allowed hundreds of people to wrongfully obtain citizenship despite documented risks and deportation orders.
I mean, at a time when we're striving to make this country safer and protect the citizens of this country, to do something like this, especially on the taxpayers' dime where we're having a rough economy right now, terrible thing to do.
So, Melissa, I just got off the phone with Senator Johnson, who's actually in the middle of an election in Wisconsin, or going through it, getting ready for an election in Wisconsin. And he says he's insistent that he is very concerned about this. They've received no new information that's changed his mind.
Wow. So has there been a response to all of it?
There has, and it came from USCIS in a form of a statement to FoxNews.com, who first broke this last night. The statement kind of doesn't really dismiss what the senators say, but doesn't really address it fully. In fact, they basically got a response that says, in part, USCIS anticipated that there would be a spike in applications this year, as we usually see in an election year, but the increase in N-400 applications has exceeded expectations. USCIS has this detailed staff of offices experiencing increased workloads and authorized overtime for many offices. Now, again, there was a surge back in 1996 that resulted in a congressional hearing and had a lot of questions about the Clinton administration and what happened then. Obviously, he had an easily re-election back in 1996. Senator Johnson says there's a lot of similarities here. He's very concerned about this, and he's concerned about potentially where this all leads. Of course, we'll continue to look into this, Melissa, and we'll get to the bottom of it as much as we can.
I hope so. Adam Housley, thank you so much for that. The wife of Keith Scott, the man killed by police in Charlotte, North Carolina, releasing cell phone video from that shooting. What it shows and what it doesn't show. Plus, debate tips from the debate team at the college hosting Monday's debate. Hofstra University students are here to tell us who needs to do what to win. And here's basketball coach Bobby Knight on why he's on Team Trump.
I think he knows how to deal with problems. He's had businesses all over the world. He's given jobs to people all over the world, and he's had problems. And he's always been able to find a way to straighten that problem out.
Hofstra University on Long Island will play host to Monday night's debate between Donald Trump and Hillary Clinton. Joining us to talk strategy, we have the best team out there. Hofstra's own debate team, Dr. Tamika Johnson, Hofstra rhetoric professor, wow, and director of forensic, Tyler Johnson, forensics team captain, and Noor Saida, forensic team member. Thanks to all of you for joining us. Dr. Robinson, let me start with you. We're going to go through each of the candidates. Okay. What advice would you give to Hillary Clinton? What does she have to do to win this debate? If you were coaching her, what would you say?
The first thing is that she needs to continue talking about policy the way she has, but also make herself more appealing to the crowd, make herself more personable. Smiling more, thinking more, speaking directly to the crowd, using language that everyone would understand, and making sure that she is very personable.
Okay. Tyler, what advice would you give to Donald Trump? What do you think he needs to do? I mean, we've seen him in various debates. Some of them, he's done some of the name calling. Other ones, he's laid back and been sort of subdued. Going into this one, no one really knows what we're going to see. What if you could whisper in his ear and tell him, here's how to win, what would you tell him?
Well, I think if Donald Trump wants to win the first presidential debate, and, you know, obviously the election, he needs to be more down to earth, and I think he needs to start talking more about policy. He needs to give specifics on how he really plans on fixing this country.
Really? You think that people in the debate audience want to hear, because that's kind of the that Dr. Robinson gave us for Hillary Clinton. You still think he should go policy?
I think we've seen Trump at his craziest. We've seen Trump say a lot of things that people find outrageous, people find to be very correct in how they feel, but I think if he really wants to win the vote that he's missing, like a more democratic people, he needs to be more down to earth and more human.
Okay. You guys are experts at sort of the psychology of it, what your body is saying while you're up there. Noor, what are some of the things that we should be looking for? I mean, everybody makes a big deal out of the handshake at the beginning, right?
Yeah, definitely.
Is that a big deal?
The handshake is a big deal.
Why?
In any conversation, communication, you need a strong handshake. And when you look at presidential candidates, if their handshake is weak, it tells a lot about their character.
Okay, but Dr. Robinson, I mean, you wouldn't want him to come in and sort of shake her arm off her body. I mean, then he's going to look like he's being abusive and picking on her.
I mean, you definitely want to come across as presidential without looking like a bully. So you're absolutely right. He doesn't want to shake it too hard, but at the same time, you know, a nice firm handshake shows that he's grasping her hand. There's a lot of science to it.
Really?
But, oh yes, there are people who study. They study body language. They study how we present ourselves to where everyone's looking for those tiny little cues on whether or not this person is qualified to be president.
What are some of the other cues? Because we've seen people walk into each other's space. I mean, you know, we had the one here in New York where Lazio walked into Hillary Clinton's space and everybody thought that that was too aggressive. Is that a good idea or a bad idea in general to leave your area?
It's a bad idea to leave your area because it is going to appear as if you are trying to be more aggressive, you're trying to take the stage, especially with Donald Trump and with Hillary Clinton. So there's going to be a little bit more of that gender language that people are going to be looking for, to where if he steps across, it's going to seem very aggressive, as well as if she does, it's going to seem way too assertive. So they both should kind of stand in their areas and just talk about what it is that they stand for.
Nora, we just watched that funny moment on the screen where you saw Al Gore stepped into George W. Bush's area and he kind of looked at him and laughed, and that ended up, I think, being one of the most memorable moments from all of their debates. He handled it well. What other body language kind of things do you look for, or do you try not to do yourself? I mean, do you try to just hold very still?
Yes, when you're talking in front of a large audience, if you have shaky hand movements, lots of flailing of the arms.
I was doing that earlier.
Yeah.
You're like, yeah, you were.
That just shows a lack of confidence in what you're saying. So if you show a very confident body stance, head tilted up, shoulders straight, and just direct pointing, as we see President Obama do often. Just this thing.
Okay. I may need you guys to stick around the next commercial break and give me some pointers. So just make a list for me. Anyway, thank you, all three of you. We have a Fox News alert. President Obama is expected to veto a bill that would allow 9/11 families to sue Saudi Arabia. The deadline is midnight tonight, but lawmakers say they're ready to override the president's veto for the first time since he took office. Garrett Tenney is live at the White House. Garrett, is the president still planning on moving ahead with this veto?
No question, Melissa. He absolutely is, and Congress is still expected to override his veto. But the White House is not letting this go without a fight. Over the last few days, the administration has been busy meeting with lawmakers to try and convince them that JASTA, or the Justice Against Sponsors of Terrorism Act, would be bad for the U.S. The families of 9/11 victims, they disagree. They have been outside the White House this week protesting that position. That has not affected the White House. The belief is that allowing the families of 9/11 victims to sue Saudi Arabia for damages, if they are found to be responsible for the 9/11 attacks, that could then open up the U.S. to a flood of similar lawsuits from other countries around the world. This past hour, spokesman Josh Earnest conceded it's not a popular position to take, but it's the one the president is willing to stand by.
The president's been quite clear about what his position is. It's a principled one. It's one that means he's taken some political heat. But he's prepared to take that political heat because he's committed to protecting our national security.
And as you mentioned, if that veto is overridden, it would be the first time in the president's 8 years in office that that has happened. Melissa?
Wow. All right. Thank you for that report. The FBI is still waiting to question the man suspected of planting bombs in New York City and New Jersey. And time is of the essence. Investigators aren't entirely sure that he acted alone. Plus, we're learning he's no stranger to the FBI. And armed men break into a house looking for cash and meet their match, a woman with a gun. Their dramatic surveillance video of what happened next, that's just ahead.
I got the hurt. They got a gun. Oh, they kicked the door coming in. They kicked the door.
Shepard Smith on the Fox News deck. For the first time, we're seeing the moments before and after police in Charlotte shot and killed Keith Scott. The video is from his wife. She recorded it on her cell phone. We'll show you the video and get a live report from Charlotte. Plus, now there's word Donald Trump's advisors are telling the Republican nominee, don't lose your cool at Monday night's debate. We'll talk to a reporter who has inside scoop on how Donald Trump's team is preparing him for his first face-off with Hillary Clinton. It's all in the next hour on Shepard Smith Reporting. We'll see you then.
Fox News alert for you. The wife of the man killed in a police shooting in Charlotte, North Carolina, now sharing some graphic cell phone video that she shot during the altercation. Fox News just now getting access to some pictures from that footage. You can see Keith Scott on the ground after the shooting with police around him. Let's talk to our panel. Greg Jarrett is a Fox News anchor and a former defense attorney. Eric Guster is a criminal defense attorney. Greg, we were talking about this during the break. We've both seen the video. What's your take?
It's ambiguous, shot from a distance, a bit shaky. You don't see a gun. You don't see the shooting itself. You don't actually see, the best I could tell, the alleged victim, Keith Scott. But there is a narration by the wife on the scene. She's shouting out instructions. At one point, she claims her husband doesn't have a gun. She instructs them that he has a traumatic brain injury that he's suffering from, which could prove key in this case. And finally, she keeps saying over and over again, don't do it, don't do it. Yeah. Is she talking to her husband, don't do it, as if make a threatening motion? It's hard to tell.
It is, although I think there's a point where she says, Keith, don't do it. I mean, it sounds like she's talking to him.
It does.
I mean, I watched it 4 or 5 times, and it just, Eric, what's your impression?
And a lot of it depends on what her narration is. What she's saying, she told her husband, don't make them bang out the windows, which indicates that they may have been trying to enter the car. And they also told her, just like Greg said, that he has a TBI, he has a traumatic brain injury.
He just took his medication, she says.
Right. Yes, which could indicate some type of mental health issue that the police have to be trained on how to deal with those things. And we've had several cases where mental health has been an issue with police interactions, and if they did not do this properly under protocol, then they could be in trouble.
Greg, one thing that strikes me is the amount of time that goes by. I mean, it's about 2 or 3 minutes where she has run back and she's getting, I believe, a cell phone charger or something for her phone. She comes back. It's this instinct that we all have now, that when something's going on, you grab your phone and you start recording so you have a record. And she never stops talking to everyone involved, saying, you know, don't shoot, he doesn't have a gun. There's so much conversation before the shots ring out.
Which makes it all the more important and imperative for the police and now the State Bureau of Investigation to release this videotape to the public. Why? Because there's a public safety concern that overrides any compromise to the investigation. I would argue there is no compromise to the investigation. All of the police officers on the scene were immediately interviewed, including the shooter himself, who, by the way, is black. That's another factor in this that hasn't got much emphasis. So those dash cam video and the body cam video of police should have been released a long time ago.
Eric, you know, watching this video, it was amazing to me, something that the police chief, a lot of other people have said, that it creates more questions than answers, and I really felt the same way watching this. I almost had it was less clear what had happened. How do you sort through all of that?
That's why we need everything. It's very interesting that the police chief said we're not going to be totally transparent, which the public wants transparency. Remember the Laquan McDonald shooting in Chicago, where the chief said, this is bad. I'm going to let you all know it's bad, and we're releasing it at 8 o'clock. The public appreciates that. The public appreciates a chief of police saying, this is a bad video, or even giving his narrative, this is what we believe the video shows, and here it is. Because so many communities do not trust the police, which you've seen time and time again, where the video does something different.
What about that? Because that's a good point. If you say we release the video, here it is. You know, we're going to rectify the situation. I mean, you can't bring someone back who's gone.
But cameras don't lie. The video often is the best evidence in a particular case. Here, there's more than one particular video because these police officers have body cameras. There is a dash cam video there. It's interesting that the chief of police, Kerr Putney, originally said this is a justified shooting. The videotape will prove it. Then all of a sudden he's hammered yesterday during a news conference, backs off and says, well, the video doesn't actually show a threatening move, and that's key.
All right, we're going to pause for a second. The governor of North Carolina right now is stepping up to the mic and giving a press conference, answering questions about this very case. Let's listen in.
No national attention, partly because of the issues in Charlotte. We've also had a gas shortage due to the pipeline break, which has now basically been returned to normal service. And we also, of course, have the ongoing protest situation in the great city of Charlotte. Very briefly, I do want to briefly talk about to the national audience and to the rest of North Carolina, because it's not been in the news, but we've had extremely serious flooding conditions in eastern North Carolina. Some of the worst flooding conditions that we've seen since Hurricane Irene. We have flooding in Bertie, Chowan, Hertford, Camden County is where the major flooding is. To the national audiences and to the statewide audience, over 17 inches of rain in some parts of our state. We also have had flooding in 7 other counties, including Currituck, Dare, Gates, Halifax, Hertford, Northampton, and several others, up to 7 inches of raining. I declared a state of emergency 2 days ago to deal with this flooding, and we also have had a transportation waiver to deal with some very, very serious issues that are going on. The city of, or the town of Windsor is the city that's been most impacted. It's a town of 3,000 individuals. It's underwater right now in many areas. We literally have water up to people's waist and above, and many houses have been flooded. The town is flooded right now.
All right, that is the governor of North Carolina. We thought he was going to be talking about this case that we're discussing right now, Keith Scott. We're going to monitor this press conference and go back to it as he says things that pertain to this. I'm going to go back to my guests that are here on the set. Greg, you were talking about the liability that the city is under and the victim that died last night who was part of the protests.
Well, obviously a wrongful death lawsuit will be filed by Keith Scott's family. But the other part relevant to the not releasing the videotape to the public is that there were riots. And one man died overnight. And there will be a wrongful death lawsuit filed by his family against the chief of police in the city saying, had you released that videotape, there wouldn't have been violent riots. Our father and husband would be alive today, and that is negligence. There is an affirmative duty to protect the public. And what did we see? The chief of police, instead of being there at the scene, monitoring and handling that riot night before last, where was he? He was on television.
Yeah. Eric, you know, as somebody who works on the defense side, what did you make of the video in terms of how would you defend everyone involved?
Defending everyone involved, it depends on the totality of the evidence, which we haven't seen yet. It depends on the shooter's perception of events. And the big linchpin in this case is whether or not he made any type of gesture or aggressive move towards the police officers. Having a gun is not necessarily a reason to use deadly force on someone. Yeah. But what did they do? What did they not do that led to that event?
Yeah. Greg, you know, one thing watching it, she seems to be saying, get out of the car, get out of the car. They're trying to tell him to get out. I mean, was that your interpretation of it? She's like, don't break the windows.
You know, it's hard to tell. I mean, first of all, did he even hear his wife? She's considerable distance, you can see on the videotape, away from where he is. We don't even know at what point in time he got out.
The governor we hear is now addressing the shooting. Sorry to interrupt you. Let's go back in and listen real quick.
Here with me today has got very little sleep during the past 24 hours, and neither did many National Guard. And we're talking about hundreds of individuals who traveled throughout the night before last, on buses and other types of transport, primarily Humvees. And these men and women who primarily have part-time jobs, many were coming to Charlotte for the first time because they come from all over the state. And I got to greet them when they arrived at the Guard headquarters yesterday in Charlotte before they were deployed out on the streets of Charlotte, and I just was so impressed with their professionalism, with their willingness to do their job, and of course with their follow-through. And I think the rest of the nation, the rest of the state saw the valuable tool that the National Guard is for our country and for the state of North Carolina. What they did upon extremely short notice last night under very, very trying conditions in supporting the police department of Charlotte was, I think, just a role model for guards in all 50 states. And I'd just like to personally thank the General for his outstanding professionalism of his team and all your commanders for the work that they've done. I've been notified by the Chief that we anticipate them still wanting to be deployed through the weekend. I have committed whatever resources he needs, and I will follow his directive. And again, thank you very much to the National Guard. You saw people hugging them hugging back. It was the best of America that we saw. I'm proud of you. I'm very proud of you. I'd like to also thank our Highway Patrol, our troopers. Again, we're not given the number of troopers that we sent, but we sent a lot.
All right, as we said, that is the governor of North Carolina. They're giving thanks to all of the different agencies that have helped through this situation that they have been with. We're going to go to break. We're going to talk a little more here. Okay, let's go back to our panel. Greg, so where do they go from here?
Well,
I mean, what's next?
It's an embarrassment to the chief of police, Kerr Putney, because this case has been taken away from him, likely because the State Bureau of Investigation is suspicious that he might be covering things up, that he wasn't forthcoming with a videotape. Ooh. They've taken the case away from him. They'll now be investigating. Look, I mean, this was a chief who was so quick to say it's a justified shooting, and then backed into a corner a day later, says, well, the evidence doesn't necessarily show that. Yeah. And so now the State Bureau of Investigation stepped in and said, you're out of here. We're going to look at this. We'll look at it fairly and objectively, and that's the right thing to do.
And the court of public opinion, he got on television and said, this tape will show that our officers were justified. This will definitively show that. Then, just like Greg said a minute ago, he had to back away from that.
Yeah, all of a sudden
and that's a problem when you're looking at a death case, especially with these types of tensions that are happening within our country. We expect our leaders to say things that are right, that are correct, and proven, and he can't.
And Greg, he made the case, which I guess you are not buying. He said originally he couldn't release the video because the family had to see it first, and then he said he couldn't release the video because it was part of an investigation, that if it were up to him, he would do it, but he couldn't. That's not true?
Yeah, he has one excuse that seems vacuous after another, and now his latest excuse is, I can't hand over the tape because the State Bureau of Investigation has taken the case over. Look, in some cases, it is true that you want to interview all the witnesses before they see a videotape that might influence their testimony. But in this case, just about everybody was interviewed, I think everybody, immediately.
Yeah, and there's even question about, they say there was a gun at the site. Now, I mean, obviously that's a very key piece of evidence because they're even disputing that. His wife saying on the video he doesn't have a gun. Right. To me, that seems like a very straightforward thing. They either found a gun or they didn't.
Well, look, I mean, there have been cases in which police officers have planted a gun at the scene of an unjustified shooting in which the victim didn't have a gun. But
they would have had to have it on them at that time when they were there.
Yeah, and Eric will probably confirm that officers
carry extra guns.
What's called a throwaway gun.
They sometimes carry extra guns.
Now, I'm not saying that
not all cops.
Here.
Now let's be clear, not all cops.
Right.
But there are some cops that it has happened and has been proven in court. But that's why it's very important for total transparency, even if it's a bad situation, even if it's a bad case, because the public depends on these people to tell the absolute truth, even when it's bad. And when this chief has told these people, oh, there's definitively a gun, definitely a gun there, we're going to show it, and we're not sure, that's a problem, a huge problem.
How has it changed things from a defense point of view that her instinct was to run and get her camera and turn it on? Now she has this video. I mean, she has, the wife has pressed this case forward, made it even more urgent to release the video that's in the possession of police because she's put her version out there.
It's put them back into another corner. Yeah. This reminds me of the Walter Scott case where the police officer shot Walter Scott in the back and said he was threatened, and then a video came out a few days later that clearly shows the officer was at fault. That's why people record everything. I've been talking about it for years. Please record every interaction with the...
Greg, how many different camera angles do you think there are? Because we were talking about the body cam video, but you mentioned dash cam. I mean, there could be many, many views of this.
There could, and there could be other, eyewitness accounts, people with their smartphones and so forth. But this is why videotaping cameras on all police officers should be mandatory everywhere. It is invariably the best evidence.
And they should not have the power to cut on the videotape. They should not have the power to delete the tape, because some of these officers have that power to cut the video on and off. They'll say, oh, I forgot to cut my video on, and then there was an interaction, then it's disputed.
Certainly muddies the waters. Gentlemen, thanks to both of you.
Thank you.
More with America's election headquarters in just a moment. We'll be right back. Surveillance video showing the moments when a woman opens fire on 3 intruders. The woman was staying at a friend's house. When she heard the men kick down the door, she grabbed her gun and started to shoot. One suspect later dying of his injuries. Officers are still looking for the 2 suspects who got away. Boy, fast thinking on her part. I'm Melissa Francis. Have a great weekend. Here's Shep.